Hey, good morning, guys. Good early morning. Much earlier today than I normally am, right? So, hi, Henny. QB is actually over in the Ferris trial stream. Both started at the same time. I think QB is waiting on the Ferris trial to actually start. Sarah Boone has started. So I'm going to share the screen and we're going to get started. Gonna get started. How are you, Henny? How are you? Hopefully people will get the notification because it's much earlier than I normally go live. So we shall see what happens today. But thank you. Thank you for being here with me. All right, let me click the play button and we will begin. I'm actually I wanted to go live. Hey, Patricia. I wanted to go live earlier this morning because when Sarah Boone goes to lunch today, I'm going to cut the stream, do a stream for Delphi updates, which should hopefully last about an hour and a half, depending on how long Sarah Boone's lunch is. And then do the Delphi video stream and then schedule a part 2 after lunch for Boone. So, lots and lots of stuff. All right, now are we ready? I'm glad you're doing good. I'm doing good.
Good morning, everyone.
Good.
Madam Clerk's going to go ahead and call the case to order.
Case number 2020 CF 2603, State of Florida, State of Florida. Names for the record, beginning with the state.
David Ketchner on behalf of the state. William J. for the state.
Defense.
James Phillips for Ms. Boone.
Tony Henderson for Sarah Boone.
Kevin Becker, we have Sarah Boone.
Ms. Boone, raise your right hand, please sworn. Please do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you.
And good morning. Can you state your full name and date of birth for the record for me?
Sarah Boone, 10-10-7-7.
Ms. Boone is seated at counsel's
10-10-7-7.
table wearing a dark gray suit jacket and a maroon blouse. She is in custody. However, she's not in any restraints, so we will be continuing to stand as our jury enters and exits. State, are there any housekeeping matters we need to address this morning before we bring in our panel? Defense.
Judge, I don't know if you got the email last night of the potential witnesses we're going to call.
In addition to the one I received this morning, yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Harper did get in last night after midnight. She was over at the hotel, but in addition, we may recall the phone extraction expert. She's not on the list.
Okay, understood. All right, are we ready to bring in our panel?
Yes.
Okay, all right, very good. Let's go ahead and stand and bring in our panel.
I wonder why it calls them panel instead of jury. That's weird. She must be looking to see if her girlfriend's in the courtroom. You got a big thumbprint on those glasses, man. You need to clean them. I can't stand that. Can't stand it. Can you guys, if you wear glasses, can you stand that? I can't handle that. When they get all smudgy. I'm like, ew, no. No, no, no. No, no, no.
State, do you recognize our jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, do you recognize our jury?
Yes.
All right, everyone can be seated. Members of the jury, good morning. Welcome back to 12 Alpha of the Orange County Courthouse. I hope you had a great evening. If you could, again, just by a show of hands, you complied with the court's instructions for the overnight break. Record reflect all hands have been raised. Members of the jury, at this point in time, the defense is going to continue with their evidence and testimony presentation. And I'm going to ask them to call their first witness at this time. Mr. Owens, you may proceed, sir.
At this time, the defense calls Deputy Ramirez Delgado.
Please swear or affirm that the testimony you should give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I swear.
Good morning. You can be seated. And can you please state and spell your name for the record for me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Gail.
My name is Jessica, first name Jessica, Jessica. First last name is Ramirez, Ramirez. Second last name is Delgado, Delgado.
Thank you, ma'am. You may inquire, sir.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, sir.
Ma'am, how are you employed?
I am a reserve deputy with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been employed with the sheriff?
7 years.
Back on July the 25th of 2018, how were you employed at that time?
I was a full-time deputy sheriff for the agency.
On that date, ma'am, did you have the occasion, due to your duties, to report or to go to 4748 Franks Lane, apartment number 3?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what you were going there for the purpose?
Yes, sir. I was a backup deputy for a call involving a male kicking a female in the face. So it came out as a domestic call.
Okay. And was it another officer who also responded?
Yes, sir. He was the primary.
Okay. Ma'am, while you were there, did you have contact with Sarah Boone?
Yes, sir.
While having contact with Miss Boone, were you able to observe any injuries
Yes, sir.
to the person?
Yes, sir. She had swelling and bruising in her right eye.
And ma'am, were you able to make contact with Mr. Jorge Torres?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to notice any injuries on his person?
Yes, sir. He had red markings and some abrasions around his neck.
Ma'am, at a certain point in time, did you place Miss Boone under arrest?
Yes, sir. I detained her and placed her in my vehicle.
Ma'am, at that time, do you recall or remember Miss Boone asking you, "Why am I in trouble?"
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Renee.
And without saying what
They
you
are
said,
feeling
but
good.
did
They're feeling better.
Did you respond to her?
Yes, sir.
After that, ma'am, do you remember Miss Boone asking you, "Why?" "Because I fucking fought back."
Yes, sir.
If I can have one more.
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
Thank you. Any cross-examination?
During the course of your investigation, you or the other responding deputies spoke to Mr. Torres as well.
Yes, sir.
After concluding all of your investigation, which involved talking to both Mr. Torres and to Ms. Boone and making your observations of the two of them, did you all make final decisions about how to handle your investigation?
The other deputy, which at the time was Deputy Zito, was the one that made that determination.
Okay. But collectively, what you all looked at was statements from Ms. Boone and Mr. Torres, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your physical observations of both persons?
Yes.
And then whatever else you may have observed on scene?
Yes, sir.
And do you take into account people's demeanor when they are giving you statements, when assessing their credibility?
Yes, sir.
No other questions?
Any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor.
Can this witness be released?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I wonder if they're going to have a bunch of witnesses like this. That's just going to be like wham bam, thank you, ma'am. And
Defense, call your next witness.
At this time, the defense calls Deputy John Alden.
they're going to call a bunch of these kinds of peoples so they can say, oh yeah, I saw her with a black eye, yeah. We took George to jail that night, yeah.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you should give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Sir, good morning. Can you state and spell your name for the record?
John Alden, John Alden.
All right, thank you, sir. You may be seated. Mr. Henderson, you may inquire.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Sir, how are you employed? How are you employed?
I'm employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office as a corporal.
Back on August the 28th of 2019, how were you employed?
I was a deputy in the Uniform Patrol Division in Sector 2.
As a part of your job duties that day, did you have the occasion to respond to 4748 France Lane, number 3?
Yes.
What was the purpose?
There ended up being a battery call.
And, sir, were you the lead officer on this case?
Yes.
Were there any other backup officers there with you?
I believe so.
Sir, on that date, August the 28th of 2019, did you come in contact with Sarah Boone?
Yes.
Sir, on that date, did you observe any injuries on Sarah Boone?
I observed redness on the left side of her neck and what to be an old injury to her right eye.
Sir, on August 28th of 2019, did you come in contact with Jorge Torres?
Yes.
And did you notice any injuries on Mr. Torres?
Yes. He had some redness on it by his left eye.
Sir, on that day, was Mr. Torres placed under arrest?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any cross-examination?
Yes. Is it fair to say that Mr. Torres had quite a few marks on him?
From my report, I remember marking the left by redness by his left eye.
And did you have the body-worn camera activated when you responded to this call?
I believe so.
All right. And so that would be the best evidence of both video and audio as to what occurred while you were on scene.
It would, especially since this happened 4 years or 5 years ago now.
And did Mr. Torres refuse to say what happened that day?
He did.
Based on the conclusion of your investigation, which involved talking to Ms. Boone and attempting to talk to Mr. Torres, as well as your visual observations of both them and the scene, is that how you all reach your conclusions?
Yes.
No other questions?
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Can this witness be released?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. J?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I know what you mean, Renee. I do think that all of these that they're talking about, though, are documented. So,
Defense, you can call your next witness.
I mean, they're probably legit. But, hey, Rogue. Good to see you. I will say, though, on the one where she says he stabbed her in the leg with that steak knife, like, is there documentation of that? Because she says that she told him a story that they were sword fighting, right? So we talked about that yesterday. She's apparently good at telling stories about how they play kid-like games. So, and she admitted to that being a made-up story about the sword fighting. So then why wouldn't this hide-and-seek story be a made-up story, right? I believe so. But, let me see. As far as the steak knife incident, though, I just don't know if...
Defense, you can call your next witness.
Judge, at this time, the defense calls Deputy Capsel or Detective, excuse me.
Hey, James. Yeah, you're right. If the roles were reversed, there would be no sympathy. It's sad that that's true. I don't know, Rogue. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. Is this Chelsea back?
Please swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes. Thank you.
Good morning again. Could you state your full name and date of birth for the record? Or, I'm sorry, full name and spell it for us.
It's Chelsea Capsel, C-H-E-L-S-E-Y.
Chelsea's back, Rogue. Looky there.
Last name is K-O-E-P-S-E-L-L.
All right, thank you. Counselor, you may inquire.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
In relation to this case, on February the 26th of 2020, did you have the occasion to interview Abraham Marino?
Yes, I did.
Was that interview recorded, ma'am?
Yes, it was.
You remember as part of that interview that Mr. Marino tell you that he had had contact with Sarah Boone on February the 24th of 2020?
Are you asking the night of the incident when police were called out?
Yes, the next morning.
The day that we were called.
That you were called out,
Okay.
the 24th.
So yes, he did have contact with her, but it wasn't in the morning. It was while we were there.
While you were there?
Yes.
Okay. What time did you get there? That's probably what's going on.
I got there around 14:20 hours, which would be 2:20 in the afternoon.
Okay. So the afternoon on the 24th.
No, it was later. I recall, I believe I was doing paperwork in my vehicle, so it would have been at some point during the investigation, but it wasn't, I didn't notice him until, I'm not sure if I noticed him until before or after Sarah was interviewed.
All right, but to his interview part, the interview, did he tell you in the interview that he had had contact with Miss Boone on that day?
Yes, he did.
Did he tell you at that time that Miss Boone had made a statement to him?
Yes, he did.
Do you remember what that statement was?
I don't wish to quote what he stated. So I don't know the exact verbiage, but he basically replayed what, I'm not sure if he replayed what exactly occurred that day, but I do know he mentioned something about, she mentioned being dragged down the stairs a couple days prior.
Did he say to you during that interview that Sarah Boone told us that a couple of days ago they had gotten into a fight where he grabbed her by her hair and dragged her down the steps?
I would assume that he's reading my report, and that does sound similar to what my report should say.
So this statement was given on the 27th of February. I'm sorry, the 26th of February. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
She's being a little smart AWS on the stand,
The
isn't she?
contact and the statement that Ms.
She's like-
Boone made to Mr. Moreno was on the 24th of February. Is that correct?
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
When Mr. Moreno is saying that Ms. Boone came up to him and made this statement that we just talked about,
Yes,
that was on February the 24th. Is that correct?
that is correct.
So when she said a couple of days ago, that would have brought it back to
Her facial
February the
expressions are
22nd.
everything.
Is that correct?
Potentially, yes.
Cracks me
Ma'am,
up.
during that interview with you, did Mr. Moreno ever indicate to you that when he had contact with Ms. Boone on the 24th,
I agree, Renee.
that Sarah Boone told him what happened was an accident? Did he say that Sarah Boone stated that she was teaching him a lesson and things got out of hand and that she fell asleep?
I don't recall the entirety of that being accurate. Yeah, I don't recall the entirety of what he just said being accurate.
Do you remember him saying that at all?
He did say that she had, I believe he said on the recording, passed out. So that's why, like, part of the statements might be accurate, but
Okay. Ma'am, would it refresh your memory if you were to see the recorded statement?
his recorded statement,
Yes.
transcription?
Yes.
Sure, yeah, great.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Ma'am, take your time. Read through that.
Okay,
When you are ready, just let me know.
okay. I don't recall all the statements that you asked, or the way you asked it, but
Would it help if I repeat it?
sure, yeah.
Okay.
You asked, like, you said multiple statements,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
this was a, like, 11-minute interview.
All right. The statement would be that Sarah Boone stated to Mr. Moreno that she was teaching him a lesson and things got out of hand and that she fell asleep. And I'm wanting to know
Did you
if
say, okay, I thought I heard you say passed out the first time. I'm not sure if you said passed out or fell asleep.
fell asleep.
Fell asleep, okay.
And what I'm asking is there any indication that he told you that statement on the date of that interview on the 26th?
She's definitely feeling a little salty. You can tell she's like, and you make me drag my
Sorry, I'm
butt
trying
down
to
here
get the part
again
where we talked
today
about that.
to have to look at this
Yes, ma'am,
heifer.
take your time.
Okay, so, like I had stated, there were certain things that I thought was accurate from your statement. He stated, I don't really, do I just read exactly what it says? Do you need like the number next to it or anything?
Yes, I have no problem if you reading what he said.
Okay, then she,
Object.
Approach.
Yeah, they're not supposed to really read. I mean, I guess
Ma'am, you cannot read the statement at this time.
Okay.
Thank you. You may continue, Mr. Henderson.
He described,
Hang on.
No.
Just wait for a question,
so
okay?
sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, sorry.
she's like,
Ma'am,
so sorry.
anywhere in that interview, do you see reference to this statement? That Sarah stated that she was teaching him a lesson and things got out of hand and that she fell asleep.
No to the first two parts of your question. I heard passed out the first time you asked me this question, and that's why I said that part of it was accurate, because he did say that she passed out in his statement. That was what Sarah told him.
Okay, did she say she was teaching him a lesson? Is that in there?
No,
And things got out of hand. Is that in there?
no, I don't recall that.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Ay, ay, ay.
And again, ma'am, this interview was on February the 26th of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any cross-examination?
Renee, we have a big family
Thank you.
too.
Can this witness be released?
Big family.
Yes, Your Honor.
State?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Defense? Call the next witness.
I believe Dr. Brandon is here.
You're right, because murder is against the law.
Making sure.
Yeah, I don't know what the point of that was. I think just to try to bring home to the jury that she didn't say it, which it just wasn't in the report. She did say it, but he was trying to make it sound like she didn't say it at all. Sneakily. Oh my goodness, Renee, I would never be. I'm the last minute shopper. I'm literally the one that's like still got stuff coming after Christmas because I order too late. And you can forget me going out and actually Christmas shopping now. It's going to be purchased online.
Judge, may we approach?
Whatever
Yes,
I
sir.
buy, because I will not. Nope. You will not catch me walking around shopping for Christmas presents. No. I ain't got the time, energy, stamina for that anymore. No. My sister and I, we used to do the whole Black Friday shopping like every year. Every Thanksgiving night morning, the next morning, we would bust out at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Go do the whole Black Friday shopping thing, be gone all day, all night. There's no way I could even, no. You couldn't pay me to go do that now. Rogue, when does the state get to rebuttal? It'll be after the defense is done with their case. Once the defense rests, the state should have the opportunity for rebuttal. Yeah. Mickey's here. She says, that's my sister in the chat, Mickey Joe. She said, I'd never do that now, but we should shop online together, LOL. Well, that would be much easier. I could totally shop online. Oh my God. Just the thought of having to get out and go Black Friday shopping. No. My back hurts right now. Even thinking about it. No. Okay, we are behind like maybe a minute, 2 minutes, something like that.
When we call?
All right.
When we call?
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would call Dr. Michael Brandon.
All right, very good.
All right, let's see what this doctor has to say.
Please swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Doctor, good morning. Could you state and spell your name for the record for us?
Michael Brandon. B-R-A-N-N-O-N.
All right, thank you. Counselor, you may inquire.
Thank you. Dr. Brandon, good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Fry, having just traveled from Miami to Orlando.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
It was a good drive.
Okay. Would you please describe for the jury your background, training, and experience, both in forensic psychology as well as battered women syndrome?
Sure. So I'm a psychologist licensed in the state of Florida. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. That's from a university called Nova University.
This will be all
I also
day.
have a master's degree in psychology. I received that in 1980, also in psychology. And I received my doctoral degree in psychology after a year internship where I worked with severely mentally ill individuals in Hialeah, Florida. In 1988, I finished my degree requirements for my doctorate in psychology. And in 1990, I was licensed as a psychologist. I've been operating as a psychologist since then, since 1990. Originally, I started off doing the work that most people kind of think about when they think about psychologists, doing therapy, counseling with people, helping them through with their problems, things like that. In 1994, I began on a career almost quite accidentally as a forensic psychologist when I testified in my first case in front of a jury. And from that time on, I've been doing mostly forensic psychology. My practice very quickly changed from that time on. I'm currently the co-director of the Institute for Behavioral Sciences and the Law, and anywhere between 80 and 90% of all my work now is related to some legal or court-related matter in the ways in which mental health interfaces or impacts or helps to give opinions about various legal issues. I've taught rather extensively in the area of forensic psychology. I teach to mostly legal audiences, but oftentimes too I speak to groups of psychology students wanting to sit up here and do what I'm doing as well. Make long drives and then come up here and talk to people about cases. I also currently on the staff, the adjunct faculty staff for the School of Psychiatry at Florida Atlantic University. I help to train their forensic psychiatrists, so not just psychologists, but psychiatrists in terms of doing this work as a psychologist or as a psychiatrist, a mental health professional who gives opinions.
I'm going to go take a nap now. I'll be back in about 5 hours.
Are you also required
I'm
to
kidding.
update your educational
But I do
background
think he's
and
going to be on the
knowledge,
stand a big chunk
as
of the
a forensic
day,
psychologist?
if I'm being
Yes,
honest.
sir. So sure. So every 2 years, we're required to get 40 continuing education credits to maintain our license. And part of that is we have to, on a regular basis, update our work in domestic violence or battered women syndrome. So we have to take those courses. We're all required, whether you're a forensic psychologist or not, to take that coursework. So as part of our requirements, we also have to take separate coursework in regards to domestic violence, which is a general term, or intimate partner violence. But along with that comes discussion as well with battered spouse, or what's oftentimes called battered person syndrome now.
And I apologize, I'm kind of bouncing around here, Doctor. I apologize again. For the uninitiated, just exactly what do you mean by forensic psychology?
So forensic psychology is a division of psychology. Most people don't think about that as often when they think about psychologists. But forensic psychologists are individuals who have degrees in psychology who are working to help to answer questions that come up in the legal system. It could be in criminal cases like we're here for today, answering various criminal questions, giving opinions about those questions. Or it could be in other settings like family settings, divorce proceedings, or sometimes civil settings like personal injury. Someone's claiming some emotional damage or something has happened to them. So forensic psychology is really the way that we use the science of psychology to help give opinions about various legal matters.
Now, what is the DSM or the DSM-5?
So the DSM it stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's kind of our code book, if you will, to help us to know what the different symptoms are for different mental health disorders, whether it's major depression or schizophrenia or anxiety. So it gives us a code book of here's the criteria you have to meet in order to have that diagnosis. And then we're able to utilize that in terms of either treatment, so even insurance billing, but being able to inform patients too about what condition we think that they're suffering from. It's been updated many times over the years. It started at just DSM, and now it's at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition, text revised. So we've gone through a lot of revisions over the years to try to fine-tune in an empirical or scientific way what the elements are, if you will, of various mental health conditions.
Now, you've been asked to testify today in regards to battered women's syndrome. Is the battered women's syndrome identified or located within the DSM-5?
So it is not. It is not a diagnostic category in the DSM-5 or other coding books as well. There's others besides the DSM. That's just the most popular one. But it's not a formal diagnosis that it is contained within that book, a classification manual that I just told you about.
Within your field of forensic psychology, however, is there a subcategory that is located within the DSM-5 that experts would recognize as a DSM diagnosis?
Yes, sir.
And what is that, sir?
So that category would be in the trauma section of the DSM-5 TR. There's a whole category on trauma disorders, and it's most closely related to something that we call post-traumatic stress disorder. That isn't the only trauma disorder, but that's the one that what used to be called battered women's syndrome, now I refer to it as battered person syndrome, but all of it really is more connected to a trauma disorder like post-traumatic stress disorder.
Now, testify that you testify in criminal matters. Do you also testify? You indicated also on personal injury cases and emotional. That would be civil, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In your experience, you've testified as an expert, as a forensic psychologist. You testified for, and today you're testifying for the defense or were called by the defense. Do you also testify for the state of Florida or other states within this country?
Yes to both of those. I've testified in other states, but I also testify for both the prosecution, the state or government, depending if it's federal or if it's a state case, and also for the defense. So I really get appointments and hired by both sides.
About how many times have you testified?
Wow. At last count, it was about 1,500 times. It's over that, way over that now. That was from a few years ago. But I testify in a lot of different kinds of hearings and trials over the course of, mostly in Florida, but in other states as well.
Now, you're familiar with the fact that there is a special jury instruction that's been recognized by the Florida Supreme Court.
Approach.
What is he wanting them to approach for? I hope this isn't going to be a long, drawn-out process. Meh. I would think so, Rogue, when you asked about or when you said surely the state has prepared their own questions for cross. I would think so. Surely to goodness, right?
The objection is sustained.
I apologize. Doctor, you testified as to battered women syndrome, battered person syndrome. Are there other synonyms or similar names for what you're describing, in particular battered spouse syndrome?
Well, we talk about it in terms of trauma disorders like post-traumatic stress disorder, but the way when it's applied to the legal system is called battered wife, or that was the original terminology for it, battered wife syndrome or battered person syndrome. So really depends on your setting. So in this setting, we oftentimes talk about this particular condition that I've been asked to talk about today, is really referred to as battered spouse syndrome.
And have you been asked to give your opinion as a legal expert and on battered spouse syndrome?
Yes, sir.
How frequently have you been asked to do that?
I've been involved in about 100 cases of just that alone. I've been involved in some sort of testimony about 50 times.
And you indicated that you testified for the state, you testified for the defense, you testified in state cases, federal cases. Could you break down on a percentage basis the number of times you testified for the state versus testifying for the defense?
It's really close in terms of the last time we looked at it, it was about 50-50. On most cases, like for instance, if there's a case that involves battered spouse, potentially battered spouse or battered wife syndrome, I'm usually called by the defense first because they raise the issue. If you're called by the prosecution, whether it be federal or state, what oftentimes happens is it's in response to a defense expert that's been called. So do I agree or disagree with that other expert? So I'm usually, the call usually comes first from the defense, but in terms of who I'm hired by, it's pretty even. It's about 50-50.
Now, this time, Your Honor, I will proffer the witness as an expert in the field of forensic psychology.
Yes, approach.
Hey, Miss King, good morning. Good to see you.
Objection is sustained. Wait. Objection is still sustained. Mr. Beck, you may continue.
Has battered spouse syndrome been accepted, to your knowledge, in the Florida court system?
Yes, sir.
Objection, legal conclusion?
Sustained.
Can you describe the classic system or systemology wherein an individual might necessarily suffer and then exhibit symptoms of battered women syndrome?
Yes. So battered spouse syndrome is a woman, usually a woman's response, doesn't have to be, but that's a classic historical research went into how women respond in situations in which there's intimate partner violence, when they've been the victim of violence. Now we know, of course, in other kinds of relationships, men can be a victim of it as well, or whether it's a heterosexual or homosexual relationship, that both men and women can be victims. But we still know the majority of those individuals that are diagnosed with that condition or given that condition, classified with that condition, are women.
Bless you.
We do know that it's a reaction, a strategy that's developed by the person who's being abused to someone who's abusing them in an intimate partner situation. And essentially what they're doing is they've made a determination that they can't effectively escape from the abuse. They can't just leave for some reason. They feel in danger or they've been threatened if they leave that something bad will happen to them. So it's a cognitive or thinking strategy on the part of the person being abused that I have to develop some coping skills or ways of protecting myself or maybe even loved ones as well from some form of imminent violence or danger or lethality. Something bad will happen to me if I don't develop a way of handling this abuse, this constant abuse that's coming towards me. So the battered wife syndrome is really a way of thinking. It's a psychological change that happens with a victim in terms of the way they cope and strategize to stay safe for themselves and other loved ones as well, oftentimes.
I'm going to ask a really silly question, if I may, Doctor. I don't know if you've noticed a bruise across the bridge of my nose this morning.
I did see that when I come in. Yes, sir.
Okay. This weekend, okay. Hypothetically, if an individual was digging around,
I'm
in the
officially
garbage
bored
and
right
fell
now
out
at this
and cut his
moment,
nose,
just
the
because
bridge
I
nose
could
wide
care
open.
less what this dude
What
has
do
to
you as a
say.
forensic psychologist anticipate,
But
or a psychologist in general?
think of yourself as a
anticipate that there might
juror.
be a physical or a psychological reaction or response to that degree of
Keep
trauma.
an open mind.
So I don't know if it would
Best
be
as you
trauma
can.
or not. It could be, depending on the degree of the injury and the pain and things like that. But certainly you'd view that garbage can differently as you approached it. So it changes your psychology or the way that you look at that particular situation or that particular object. So by viewing it differently, you may engage in different behaviors. You may approach it differently. You may have somebody else approach it. You may approach it with both hands up. So it changes your behavior and your thinking about that garbage can.
Does that also apply to interpersonal relationships?
So it certainly can. No two people always react the same way to every situation. One person's trauma is not a trauma to another person. But for people who do develop battered spouse syndrome, they do begin to change the way they view the person who's abusing them and what they have to do in order to maintain either their life or their safety, their physical safety in terms of their behavior and interactions with that person.
Now, is there a specific set of criteria that a psychologist, forensic psychologist, would necessarily rely upon in attempting to make a diagnosis or an assessment of battered women's syndrome?
Yes, sir.
And what are those criteria?
Well, you'd want to see one if some type of abuse has occurred. That abuse can be physical, it can be sexual, it can be emotional, or it can just be the threat of abuse or bad things that's going to happen to you. So there has to be something bad that's happened or that's threatened to be happening over a period of time. So abuse has to be present in order for this to be underway. Without abuse, there's no battered wife syndrome. But that's not enough. There also has to be what's called coercive control. Coercive control is really keeping the person's social interactions, overseen on a regular basis, controlling money, controlling preferences, even TV preferences sometimes, social media, looking at social media that the person is accessing or looking at, who they're talking to on Facebook, who they're texting. So it's a combination of abuse and coercive control that results in a person feeling victimized, but that's still not enough. That person then has to feel like they can't escape from that. They've either been told, if you leave me, you're going to die, or a family member is going to be harmed, your children, your mother, whatever it might be. And as a result of that, they develop strategies to cope with that, acquiescing, pleasing, doing anything they're asked to do, demeaning themselves, allowing themselves to be controlled. All of the things that would fend off, if you will, some abuse or attack or threat to them or someone who surrounds them. So those would be the components that you would need to have, and that dance continues to go on usually repeatedly throughout the course of that relationship.
So I think what you're describing is, in a sense, a subjective nature to the syndrome that's being described.
It's both objective and subjective. So objective in terms of the facts, like what's really happening. A person's being abused, they're being told certain things, there's control over them. But then the subjective part is the person's interpretation of that, their perception of that. So there's really both going on, and they have to kind of work together in order for this syndrome to be formalized and properly diagnosed.
You indicated that there sometimes may be some defense mechanisms that are, or strategies that are devised by the battered individual, the abused individual.
Yes, sir.
In your experience and your training, do controlled substances, alcohol, drugs, frequently appear in your analysis or assessment?
Yes, and the way they appear is they can appear either from the abuser or the abused or both. What can happen from the abuser standpoint is they may only be abusive, or the abuse may become worse if they abuse substances. From the abused standpoint, it may be self-medication. It may be a way of coping with the anxiety that there's going to be something bad that potentially could happen to them or somebody else. It's kind of a way of dealing with walking on the eggshells. So if I use substances that can deaden the pain, if you will, for me, or help me to forget about it. So it's oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes part of either the abuser's behavior or the abused behavior.
Do they, in your experience, do they, on occasion, actually defend the individual that is abusing them?
That's a very frequent part of this syndrome. Not always, but it's very frequent. It's why interviewing them becomes difficult sometimes, because they're used to explaining away their behavior, the abuser's behavior, my black eye, my missing tooth, his screaming and yelling in the background while I'm talking to mom on the phone. So they're used to making excuses for it. It's part of the coping strategy, trying to explain away this behavior. He's had a bad day. She's, really upset about something else that's going on. She's really never like this at any other time. So defending that person is oftentimes a part of the battered spouse syndrome, and getting the person who's been abused to get them to stop defending them so they can talk about the actual abuse becomes a challenge.
Now, the DSM makes reference on occasion to rule-outs, I assume for the diagnosis that's being applied. What is a rule-out?
A rule out in our parlance says that we should consider these things before we look at other diagnoses. So, for instance, if we're going to consider schizophrenia, we should rule out substance abuse first, because oftentimes some drugs can create hallucinations and delusions and psychotic symptoms. So there's always rule outs, just like there are for medical conditions. So look for this before you consider this, is really what a rule out is.
Are there specific rule outs for battered woman syndrome or PTSD?
Sure. So there's rule outs for everything, because you're considering a number of different conditions before you make a differential diagnosis, or you pick that's the one that I think best fits this person. So yes, there's rule outs for both of those.
For my sake, what is a differential diagnosis?
That's how you decide which one. Whether it's your medical doctor, your psychologist, whoever, it's how they pick the right diagnosis. So you're going through kind of a card catalog in your head, and you're saying, all right, there's symptoms of this, but that's also consistent with symptoms of that. So is it schizophrenia? Is it bipolar disorder? Now I have to ask more questions. It's a decision tree. And that decision tree helps you to inform the
My
person
mom never would let
and
me
either
have
make a
that,
diagnosis in a
Renee, the
legal
garbage
setting
pail kids.
or help to treat them
No.
clinically.
She was like, no, you can't
Now,
have those.
If the individual, the psychologist who's doing the evaluation, identifies the presence of certain rule outs, what is their response professionally to those rule outs in establishing or assessing the patient?
You have to go down a decision tree. And we all kind of do decision trees in our mind every day about what we should do or shouldn't do in certain situations. It happens automatically. It's more structured when you're doing it professionally. So if you have a concern about substances, then you would kind of take that track and you'd have to ask a lot of questions in that area. So you'd want to know what kind of substances, how often are they using those substances, what kind of effect have those substances had on them before. I just picked one of many possible rule outs there. But every one of them you'd have to explore or ask additional questions, because of course you don't want to come up with a wrong diagnosis, because in a legal setting that leads you to a bad opinion, in a clinical setting it leads to bad treatment.
Now, I want to go back just a second. We talked about the subjective nature of the abused individual's understanding of what's happening. Does this subjective, or does the experience that they have suffered result in, on occasion, their experiencing or their anticipating or assuming or imagining a threat that others may not?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
They're going to approach all day long. Yeah, Renee, on those garbage pail kids, though, I would always be like, Mom, can I have these? Mom, can I have these? And she'd be like, no, you're not getting those. She hated them. Oh, he had braces and he knew you wouldn't have let him. I'd love him. Oh. Lord, they're coming out with Delphi updates off and on.
Objection is sustained.
Doctor, from what you described this morning, I think we're talking about
Hey, Amanda, welcome back.
a complex and sophisticated process for assessing and diagnosing PTSD, battered women, the matters that you described. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
And in this instance,
Yeah, we did one a couple days ago, Mickey, on the channel, a Delphi trial update, and then I'm going to be doing another one today when Sarah Boone goes on lunch break.
doing an assessment as to Sarah Boone.
Approach.
And they're approaching again. And they're approaching again. Okay, thanks, Mickey Juror. I'd love to be sitting in that courtroom, to be honest. Yeah, her pic's cute, right, Renee? Amanda's little purple giraffe. There was someone in here in the chat yesterday. His name was Steven something. And his profile picture was super cute, too. Come on, come on, come on. I have a feeling it's going to be Sidebar City all day. All day.
Objection sustained.
Doctor, when you are retained to do an evaluation in these matters, what is your practice in regards to the assessment proceedings, the assessment efforts?
Well, I'd first want to know what type of an assessment that it is, because there's different methods of approach that you'd use to analyze and be able to give an opinion on whatever question's being asked of you. So the very first goal for me as a forensic psychologist is to isolate what the question is. So what are they asking me to do? Because I want to know, A, can I do that? Am I qualified to do that, or should I refer that to somebody else? Or B, is that something I'm going to have enough time to do and enough resources to do? Then the next thing I would do is start asking questions about specifically what you already have or what can you get to help me answer this question. So right away, I'd start to find out what's available. As forensic psychologists, we're supposed to do comprehensive evaluations of whatever the legal issue or question is, and it's supposed to rely on multiple sources of information. So depending again upon the question, I'm trying to then define early on what are those multiple pieces of information I'm going to need to help to try to give an opinion and an educated opinion about that matter.
Have you done an assessment in this particular case?
No, sir.
Can you tell us very briefly whether that was your decision?
Objection, relevance?
Okay, that's fine. I can move on.
Objection sustained.
In your experience, doctor,
Thank you very much.
can battered women syndrome rear its ugly head? For instance, when there are threats to other members of the family, two-legged or four?
So yes, that's very common, that it's not just the person. It increases the terror from someone who's doing the abuse to mention other family members that they might also suffer abuse. So whether it's emotional or physical, those type of things are very common. Not always, but it's very common in the course of domestic violence cases or intimate partner violence cases.
And that fear that's developed by the abused individual may exist contemporaneously with other issues, alcoholism, schizophrenia, and the like. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. They can all be combined together, and certainly that increases if there's other family members that are threatened or live in the same home or close by. That can increase the terror, and the purpose of that is to increase control, to make sure the abuser has more control over the person who's being abused.
1 second, Your Honor. May I?
Yes, sir.
So, in doing an assessment, doctor, do you look at outside materials?
Yes, sir, always.
And what kind of outside materials do you necessarily review in order to make this assessment?
Specifically to battered woman syndrome?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So specific to this, you'd want to look at a lot of different sources of information because you're trying to, A, make a diagnosis if there's a trauma-related disorder, but you're also trying to figure out if there's the other elements necessary to make the diagnosis as well, like abuse that's been chronic over a period of time, and that the person feels they can't leave that situation, and if other people have been threatened. So you'd want to know things like not only what the facts are of the particular incident, usually some crime that's been committed, but you'd want to know the history of those behaviors. Has anyone else seen those? Or there are people you can talk to, friends, neighbors, bosses, anybody who's seen or heard of this abuse before. Have there been medical visits where the person has actually been damaged and shown up, made some other excuse, they slipped or fell or whatever it might be? You'd want to do psychological testing as a forensic psychologist because we have very good tests that help us to determine whether someone's suffering from a trauma-based disorder or not. You'd want to know if the person who'd been accused of the crime for this type of evaluation made any statements to the police. If they did, you'd want to hear that statement. Or has there been a 911 call or calls? If that's happened, you'd want to hear that too. So any evidence you could collect, and these are some of those questions I was talking to you about before, you'd want to ask the person who's trying to hire you in the beginning, well, tell me what you have, because you'd want to see whether or not you're going to be able to make this analysis or not. So it's not good enough just to talk to the person, because that's just one form of information. It's almost like being a behavioral detective, if you will, as a forensic psychologist, because we're trying to get as much evidence wrapping around our interview with the person as possible to be able to guide our questions, but inform us and see whether there's what we call convergent validity. It's a fancy way of saying, does everything agree with each other? Does everything connect in a way that it all sort of makes sense? Or are these strange conflicting pieces of evidence that we need to explain away, or it just doesn't fit the criteria? So it's a rather comprehensive and complex evaluation that has to be conducted to come up with this. And the final piece I'd say about it is that because oftentimes the abused person is defending still the person that they've oftentimes committed a crime against, it takes a bit of time to get to where you need to go. with all victims of trauma, whether you're talking about situations where you're doing therapy or you're doing an analysis in this type of setting, a criminal setting, it usually takes some time to break through that and get them to trust you to talk about the trauma, but to stop defending the person and talk about the abuse and how they felt about the abuse. Your goal, if you will, is to be able to see what's happening in that situation through the abused person's eyes. If you look at it through your eyes, often it doesn't seem to make sense. But if you look at it through their eyes, if it meets the criteria for a battered spouse, then you can better understand their world and what they're dealing with.
And real briefly, some of the things that you are evaluating when you examine, particularly the individual themselves, you're looking for anxiety and or fear?
Yes.
Low self-esteem?
Yes.
Are you looking for depression?
Yes.
Are you looking for any form of social or interpersonal withdrawal?
Withdrawal, especially if it's forced withdrawal, controlled withdrawal, if there's consequences to socializing with my family, my friends, calling them on the phone, texting them. So especially in that context.
Stockholm Syndrome.
Sure, that can be part of it.
And what is Stockholm Syndrome, real briefly?
So it's really adapting to someone who's captive or taking over a person, controlling their life, sort of adapting to that situation. The famous model of that would be many, many decades ago, a woman called Patty Hearst, who was kidnapped. But it's taking on the beliefs and taking on an acceptance, if you will, of a kind of a captive situation. And in these situations with women who have been abused, who meet the criteria for battered spouse syndrome, they oftentimes adapt, defend, and take on in an acquiescent way that this is okay and I'm part of this situation as opposed to opposed to the situation.
Will this syndrome exhibit itself in physical attributes?
It can, at times, even physical illness at times.
Inability to sleep, inability to keep food down, and those type of things.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Would that individual potentially experience hypervigilance?
Well, that's a large part of it, of any trauma-based disorder is hypervigilance. What changes when you've been traumatized, any kind of trauma, not just abuse, but what changes is your perception of danger. So whether it's the lid of the garbage can hitting you on your nose, or whether it's someone being abusive towards you, those situations change your perception of danger. So you no longer see that object or that person in the same way. You have a foreboding sense of danger could occur. So other people may not perceive it with that person. He's so nice at work, or he's nice in these other settings, or he's so great on the softball field, but at home he's different. So that person who's being abused, their perception changes.
Does that include denial?
It could include denial, and oftentimes that's part of the explanation. The defensiveness of that person is the denial of how bad things are that are going on.
Thank you, Doctor. For this time.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Nice to see you in person.
Good to see you again.
So there's a subjective component to trauma, is what I understand you're saying, correct?
Always. Yes, sir.
And so hypothetically, a couple could be in a 3.5-year relationship with physical violence, emotional violence, even sexual violence, but either or both of those partners may or may not believe that is a traumatic experience for him or herself, correct?
Yes, sir. People mistake the stimulus about what happens as the trauma. The trauma is really the reaction to it. So bad things that happen, people don't always react in the same way to them. So yes, sir, that's correct.
So for instance, a homicide detective or a homicide prosecutor may go out to a scene and see a freshly dead body, and their perception of that environmental stimulus may be very different from somebody who works at Dunkin' Donuts and just gives us muffins in the morning coming across a dead body. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. That homicide detective may be able to go eat lunch right after it, and the other person who works at the donut restaurant may not be able to eat for a couple of days as a result. So yes, perception is a big part of how trauma occurs.
And I understand your answers today, and I'm not saying that they were different the other day. But I understand you to say that it's very important to do a comprehensive evaluation to get the full picture of what is going on in the perceived battered spouse's mind, correct?
When we approach.
Yes.
Oh, this is going to get hairy. Sorry, I haven't been looking at the chat. I've been over here making a stream for the Delphi lunchtime stream. So, ay. Mickey's making a mushroom bag. Cute. Cute. Hey, Donnie, I missed you coming in. How are you, Miss Donnie? How are you? Trying to go back and forth with my water and my coffee. Water. Ay. Renee's got questions. Mickey Joe. She's got questions. Bum.
The objection is overruled.
So, we've been talking about the importance of doing a comprehensive evaluation with as many collateral sources as one could possibly have when making an assessment about the battered spouse syndrome, correct?
Yes, sir. Relevant piece of information. Yes, sir.
And would you agree that obviously the person who is accused of committing a crime, there are credibility issues that you do need to
Hey there, Adam.
care
Good morning.
for when
Good
relying
morning. Good
upon that
morning.
person's history provided about the events leading to that and the past events
Good
describing the
morning.
relationship
Good
with the intimate
morning.
partner.
Yes, sir. In every forensic evaluation, that's the case.
Is this particularly important if there's a comorbidity with an alcohol abuse disorder?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what alcohol abuse disorder means in the DSM-5 TR?
Sure. It's the biggest part of it is it's not just the use of alcohol, it's impairment that happens as a result. So it's the excessive use of alcohol, but that could mean something different, just like the excessive use of marijuana might mean. But it's the use of alcohol to the degree that it impairs or infects a person's life. And with that may come a lot of other things like deceitfulness or aggression or unreliability, sleep or somatic problems, difficulties. So, but the important thing to remember there is that it's the use of a substance that impairs or affects a person's life.
And if there is alcohol involved in the histories being given about either the event in question or any preceding events, must the evaluator take that into account when evaluating the memories and perceptions of the person giving them that history?
Yes, so in introducing that new topic about memory, we know that substances can interfere and impair memory. So as a result of that, you'd want to know what they were using, how close it was. If you're talking about a particular event, like a crime, you'd want to know if there was substance usage, and if so, what the person's memory functioning was, and does that match up with other sources of information about what those events were.
Are you familiar with the narcissistic personality disorder?
Yes, sir, of course.
Is that something recognized in the DSM-5 TR?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell us whether or not a person who is giving a history, whether it's the patient/client or whatnot, has traits, perhaps not a diagnosis, but even just traits of the narcissistic personality disorder, is that something the evaluator should account for in evaluating the credibility of the history given?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because all forms of disorders or conditions or just traits may lead to inaccurate information, either not purposely or purposely. They may be deceptive. So certain personality disorders or traits can lead to deception or inappropriate or inaccurate information. That's why you need more than one source of information. Does what this is what this person's saying to me check out with other sources of information?
And I don't mean to quiz you on it, but can you tell us some of the criteria for the narcissistic personality disorder?
I can, yes, sir. So it is a grandiose sense of self-worth. It's the consideration of yourself over anybody else. It's kind of operating in your own world. So it's an inflated sense of who you are. It's a misperception of how important you are to other people and your meaning to other people. It's a sense of specialness, that you stand out from other people in terms of special skill or skills, and that other people, if they don't recognize that, they should recognize that. So the biggest heading there is an inflated sense of self-esteem and grandiosity.
Are you familiar with an adjustment disorder diagnosis?
Yes, sir.
And is that in the DSM-5 TR?
Yes, sir, correct.
Can you tell us about that?
Adjustment disorder is a person's reaction, and it could be emotional, it can be behavioral, or it can be both, to a situation that occurs. You broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, so you're upset about that. And so as a result, you're tearful, you're anxious or nervous or worried about what may happen to you as a result of breaking up with them, or you behaviorally may start not going to work, or get into more arguments or fights with your children as a result. So it's a temporary reaction to a stressful situation that occurs in some individuals.
And hypothetically, if a person who is giving a history for criteria of diagnosis, let me strike that. If somebody is giving a history and that is being used to come to an evaluation conclusion of battered spouse syndrome, if that person has been diagnosed with adjustment disorder predating the traumatic relationship, is that something the evaluator should take into account?
You'd want to know any prior diagnosis, because it may not necessarily be exclusionary, but it could. So adjustment disorder is a temporary reaction. You're upset in a temporary period, and most of them just go away on their own. Whereas something else like a traumatic stress disorder is long-term. It's something that a person's stuck with for a period of time that usually doesn't just go away on its own. So yes, you'd want to know that for that term I used before, that differential diagnosis. You'd want to know those things to compare and contrast them and hold them up against each other.
Now, hypothetically, if somebody says things like, I'm the best thing that has ever happened to you, and I'm the best you'll ever do, are those indications of the narcissistic personality disorder?
Well, they could be. You wouldn't want just that alone. You'd want to see if that was happening in other settings. Is it happening on the job, with friends, with family members? Is it showing up on psychological testing? But certainly that would be a red flag. You'd go, I want to pay more attention to that. I want to investigate that further.
And is it important when evaluating trauma-based disorders, because they're based on emotional reactions, to do that rule out on alcohol or drug use?
Certainly you'd want to do that. It's not usually disguised as a trauma-based disorder. Alcohol and trauma aren't usually rule-outs for each other, but it could exacerbate a condition. It could make you diagnose a trauma condition when it's just an adjustment disorder. I say just, I don't mean to minimize it, but it's not as serious as a trauma-based disorder.
Is it important to consider whether the abuser and or the abused behave differently in the absence of alcohol or drugs?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because you're trying to analyze a psychological condition. If as a result of drug or alcohol abuse, their behavior changes or their perceptions change, that's not a psychological condition, that's a substance abuse disorder. So that's why you'd want to know that. So if their condition remains the same, maybe it's a little worse when they're using drugs or alcohol, but it's the same perception of threat or danger, then you're going to diagnose a trauma-based disorder. If not, then you're going to diagnose a substance abuse disorder. You can have both, but you'd want to rule one out as opposed to the other.
And are you familiar with the classic three-step cycle of battered spouse syndrome or domestic violence?
Yes, sir, I am.
Can you explain that to the jury?
Sure. So there's a cycle of violence that was first developed by a woman in the 70s called Lenore Walker, Dr. Lenore Walker. She's a psychologist who's usually credited with developing the whole theory of battered spouse syndrome. And in the classic model, which we know oftentimes happens, not every time, but in the classic model, there's a period of tension buildup where things are happening, little arguments are happening, there's bickering back and forth, there may be some threats or some loud voices back and forth, but it's all things that are leading up to a possible violent episode. Then there's the episode that happens itself, the violent episode. It could be verbal, sexual, physical, but there's the violent incident that occurs. And then after that violent episode occurs, there's a honeymoon phase where the person who's done the abuse, they're apologizing, taking that person who was abused out to dinner, buying them things, saying nice things to them, complimenting them to sort of make up for the abuse. And it's it's called the cycle of violence. And the reason why is it tends to repeat itself in a lot of these situations with battered spouse syndrome, where you see this repeating itself over and over and over again. So people are kind of stuck in these revolving doors in their relationship.
And can
Oh,
one
hey,
cycle
Adam,
be
no,
enough
this
to
is the
traumatize a
defense's
person?
witness.
Yes.
Does this trauma necessarily have to be
The
coming
state
from a man
rested
to a woman?
No.
yesterday.
And in fact, as times have changed, language has changed, and so when we keep referring to it as battered woman syndrome in the courtroom today, what we're actually talking about now is battered spouse syndrome or even
Cute.
intimate partner violence.
6
Yes, so I mean,
foster
interpartner violence can happen
kittens.
outside of legal settings, but it's really a kind of the large overgrouping, if you will, to be able to talk about all of these other things that can happen as a result, like trauma-based disorders and battered spouse syndrome. And you're right, the later research has kind of pulled us away from thinking this only happens to women in heterosexual relationships. We know now there's all sorts of derivations, and that men can suffer also from battered spouse syndrome, battered person syndrome, homosexual couples. So we know it goes around to everybody, but still, women are more often diagnosed with battered spouse syndrome than anybody else.
Does the trauma have to come in the form of physical violence?
No, sir.
Does it have to come in the form of sexual violence?
No, sir.
Can it come in the form of emotional or mental violence?
Yes, sir.
And would examples of that include such as running the partner down and telling them that they're no good and, just general insulting and lowering their value?
It could. Remember, that's the stimulus, so it would depend on how the person who's receiving that responds to it as to whether or not it becomes traumatic. But yes, sir, that would be the first red flag you'd want to investigate.
And you mentioned isolation before. So if somebody in a hypothetical intimate partner setting is trying to isolate the partner from his or her family members or friends or coworkers, can that be, and I'm not saying necessarily, can that be indications of intimate partner violence that could lead to battered spouse syndrome?
So sure, that'd be an example of coercive control. So if a person was doing that, that's consistent with that classification of battered person syndrome. Yes.
And hypothetically, controlling another person, the intimate partner's personal property or effects, such as a birth certificate or identification papers, can that be indication of emotional trauma towards the partner who is lacking the control over those identification papers?
So that's a stimulus that could result, depending on how the person subjectively perceives it, in some trauma. So yes, all of the things that you mentioned could be stimulus, if you will, that a person could perceive as traumatic.
And hypothetically, if one partner A gives partner B a gift, such as a bicycle, but partner A continues to maintain that the bicycle is his or hers because he or she bought it, even though it was a gift to B, can that be a form of emotional abuse towards B?
Sure, it sounds like control, but I guess you could interpret it as emotional abuse too, but it sounds more like a control mechanism that'd be consistent.
And I'm not suggesting that it's legally or morally okay, but when one intimate partner does these hypothetical emotional things, non-physical violent things to partner B, if partner B has poor personal skills and coping skills and may be consuming alcohol, is it unreasonable or unfathomable to hear that partner B responded with physical violence to partner A?
Objection, assuming facts not in evidence.
Sustained.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Hey, Margaret. How are you doing? How are you doing? I hope you fared well after yesterday's busy day cleaning out your mama's house. I hope so. I hope so. You got one eye open. She's got one foot in front of the other. And soon she'll be walking out the door. Got God, can you believe Christmas is going to be here sooner than we realize?
After hearing argument of counsel, the objection is overruled.
So may I respond to that?
If you remember the question,
Do.
please go ahead.
So it would increase the probability of physical violence. So if those things in fact were perceived as threatening or abusive in any way or insulting to the person who they were directed towards, it would increase the probability of physical violence.
And then again, the perceptions are all in the eye of the beholder, whether emotional things that are said to one another or physical things are done to one another, whether the recipient of that behavior views it as trauma is a subjective decision by that person, right?
Yes, the perception is the impact. So that's how you would know that. It's just, water off a duck's back, or is it something that kind of sticks with me and I think about it all the time?
Now, you mentioned earlier anxiety, low self-esteem, and depression can all be components of battered spouse syndrome, correct?
Correct.
Is it important as the evaluator to rule out whether or not these conditions predated the violent or abusive relationship?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because where things start is important diagnostically. So if all of those things were in place, all of the symptoms that were just mentioned are in place, then you wouldn't attribute those to the abuse. You'd say those things were pre-existing. Now, abuse could make it worse, but in terms of your diagnosis, you'd need to know where things started. So if those symptoms didn't start at the time where there was abuse that was alleged to have occurred, then it's unlikely that it's attributed to that abuse.
And independent of any narcissistic personality disorder traits, would you agree that anybody in a certain legal setting has a motivation to present themselves in a certain way?
Yes, to do impression management, either depending on the outcome. So if there's punitive sanctions, they may lie to make themselves look worse, or as a result, if they're in other settings, like divorce settings, they may lie to make themselves look better. So there's always some impression management you have to kind of look through in your evaluation.
And that's important for an evaluator?
It should be looked at in every evaluation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any redirect examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Just want to, one more time, in response to the state's questioning, you indicated that where an individual's credibility may be in question, there is a necessity that the individual who's making the assessment corroborate whatever they're being told. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, in a number of different ways. We have psychological tests that assess for things called malingering or faking mental health problems or difficulties. So you'd want to do that. You'd want to look at other evidence to see if it's all consistent. So it's very important you don't just rely on self-report.
Is it possible that an individual may exhibit one or two attributes of a particular DSM diagnosis, but not actually qualify because it's simply not there?
Right, sure. So sometimes like social isolation can be because we're introverted, or it could be part of depression. So you need to kind of follow it out and see how many of the symptoms are there to see whether or not it meets the criteria.
So I may exhibit one or two symptoms of narcissism, but not qualify because I don't meet all of those, or a significant number of the indicators that you would rely upon to make that diagnosis.
Yes, sir, or it can be situationally based, like we may display narcissistic features here in a courtroom, but may not do that in any other part of our life.
Now, in your experience, have you determined, learned, either through your studies, experience, and so on, whether or not the abusive behavior may begin based upon an individual's perception of things occurring to him as a child or her as a child? In other words, if they grow up in an abusive household.
Okay, I understand.
Objection. Hypothetical, not necessary.
Sustained.
You've indicated that there are things that, I think in response to the state's cross-examination, that there are things that may add to or may contribute to a particular psychosis or symptom. Would an individual's background as a child include those type of criteria?
Yes, sir. You're more vulnerable to certain psychological conditions based on your history. So if you've
Hey,
been
India.
traumatized before, or bad situations have happened to you before, if you've suffered
This
from
is
depression
Dr.
before, it makes you
Brannon, I
more
think.
vulnerable to those conditions or other conditions later on.
And he's a
Finally, one
forensic
question, or
psychologist.
one symptom that we
Talking
haven't
about
discussed,
Sarah's
I don't think,
battered
but maybe it was
spouse
discussed by the state, was
syndrome.
learned helplessness. What is that?
Learned helplessness, I've really spoken about it a little bit, but now we have the fancy term for it. Learned
Do it,
helplessness
Margaret. I
is
dare
really
you.
researched by someone named Seligson, a doctor named Seligson, a psychologist, research psychologist. And just real briefly, what it is, it's when someone kind of gives up and feels like there's nothing that they can do to change their situation. It was originally done with laboratory animals. But where a person really feels that no matter what strategy they've taken, like leave, stay, fight, whatever it might be, it won't work. It usually leads to depression or developments of other strategies, like I have to appease or please or make sure I do everything correctly or apologize. So it's really believing that no matter what you do, it won't be effective.
Doctor, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for
Sure.
traveling up here from Miami so early in the morning.
No problem at all.
Thanks for the rest.
Thank you, sir. You can be excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Wow.
approach for a
Okay, that
moment.
was much quicker than I thought it was going to be. Much quicker than I thought it was going to be. Nice. Yes. Now I wonder how many more witnesses are they going to have? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could have this trial done by the week, end of the week? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if da 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 da. Sorry, I'm sitting here reading about things I need to send in donations for the kids' school Halloween thing. Stuffs. Which, by the way, I've ordered her Halloween costume. She's going to be a pirate. She wants to be a pirate. She says, "Arr." It's the cutest thing. It's the cutest thing. So I got that. All right. I've been busy. Yeah, right, Gail, the Beach Boys. That was from I love that movie, 50 First Dates. Such a good movie. And of course they played that song over and over and over in that movie.
All right, members of the jury, it is 10:40 at this time. We're going to go ahead and take that mid-morning break.
Oh, shoot. I thought they were going to say
Similar
lunch.
instruction I've given you over the last couple of days. I'm sure you're tired of hearing it, but I got to keep telling you. Please don't have any conversations among yourselves or anyone else about the persons, places, things, or charge involved in this case, and do not conduct any independent research on those things. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes at 5 till 11. Thank you very much. Y'all may be seated. Thank you. All right, we'll be in recess for approximately 15 minutes. Thank you.
15 minutes. 15 minutes. 15 minutes. What time is it? It's 10:45, so yeah. About 11 o'clock, they'll be ready. Wonder when they'll take their lunch. I have the Delphi stream because in case you missed it earlier, I mentioned that when Sarah Boone goes to lunch, when they go to lunch for the day, we're going to cut the stream, and then I have another stream scheduled for Delphi. I want to do a Delphi trial update during the Sarah Boone lunch break. So, but it'll be in a different stream by itself. And then once Delphi will probably be about an hour long, depending on how long the Sarah Boone lunch break is. And then we'll come back for part 2 of Sarah Boone. So, yeah. I can hear QB in the distance because I have, listen.
Is it good?
Can you guys hear her?
Oh, you're rolling your eyes. I was gonna say, are you being sarcastic? What kind is it? Is it Dave's? Is that what it's called? Dave's? I think it's Dave. Dave's Killer Bread or something like that.
She's over there talking about Dave's Killer Bread.
I had to go to the nutritionist yesterday. It's a whole long story. But
Oh,
I learned something yesterday.
let's listen.
Yeah, there's some of them that are good. I learned something yesterday.
Hold on, let me type over there to her and tell her that we're listening to her. Can you understand what she's saying, or does it just sound garbled?
Your carb, you have a more
Can you actually hear what she's saying, or does it sound garbled? They're having a whole discussion about bread. And QB's like, I have to go to a nutritionist. Okay, you can understand her. Okay. I'm going to tell her in the chat that we're listening to her. Hold on a second.
So like the protein, let me look at my paper. She gave me a really handy little paper too. Look, I had a whole attitude when I went to this nutritionist because I have a lot of health issues that work very hard against me. Yeah, go get some cheese. Put some cheese on it. Yep. Or you can do peanut butter, an egg. So yeah, I'm looking at this thing right now. Hi. We're on a break too. How you doing? We're talking about carbs and my nutritionist.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching our Sarah Boone.
I can't listen to both at the same time. I sure can't listen to myself talk. Oh, Jesse Weber, he got you. So Eurelia's having a piece of low carb toast or bread. So I was asking, I'm waving at you, but you can't see me. I was trying to tell everybody hey. Okay, so it's Kroger brand, which means, what's it called? Carb Master? Kroger. Who do I have here that's Kroger? I got somebody here that's the same as Kroger. Might be Harris Teeter. I'll have to check. I know that Dave's Killer Bread is pretty good. But I was learning them from the nutritionist. When you have a carb, you have to have a protein.
Okay. I'll go ahead and turn her off or turn her way down. And we'll chit chat for a little bit. I just thought it was funny. They're on a break too, apparently, on the Ferris trial. So I was like, Sherry said to tell everybody hi too. But on this fall carnival stuff that, how they always have like send in the canned goods and all that kind of, it's like that time of the year, right? So I need to make a little list of things to send into the kiddos' classroom. So that, if they get enough points, they get like a pizza party or something. It's super cute. It's super cute how they do that. And then the box tops. Do you know that they have an actual box tops app now? I mean, they probably had it forever, but I did not know that because I have not collected box tops in forever. Do you guys collect box tops? Rogue says, I like the state turning the witness around. Yeah. He's an expert, so they can use him to explain Sarah's true nature. She's definitely narcissistic. right? Definitely. Okay, Jesse Weber, are you done with your infomercial? Okay, apparently he's done with his infomercial. Bum. Oh, Amanda. Amanda's behind. Isn't he the same one that was in the Swan murder trial? Is he? Hi, Andrea. Welcome. Is is he the same? I don't think so. I don't think so. Um, Rogue, right? George didn't even have his own phone. She treated him like he was a 5-year-old. She does. She treats him like he's a 5-year-old. Um, Amanda's behind in the chat. She'll probably catch up here in a second. But Andrea, or not Andrea, Amanda, the person talking is QB. She's streaming for me. She's hosting the other stream on the channel for the Ferris trial that's going on. So we have 2 streams simultaneously streaming on the Crime Cafe channel right now. Ferris, Melody Walker Ferris, and then this one, Sarah Boone. And she's over there. They're on a break on the Ferris trial. They were on a 15-minute break too, and so she was sitting there chit-chatting with people in the chat, and we were listening into her bread, carb conversation. Rogue said, hate to think how she treated her son. I doubt she ever abused him. Brian would have put a stop to that right away. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we really have no idea what sort of relationship she has with her kids or her kid. I mean, unless there's been people that have said things, you know, but I haven't ever heard anything. Gail, you haven't collected the box tops in years, not since the boys were in school. Margaret said Crime Cafe all over my house. QB upstairs, Jenny downstairs. There we go. Sarah gabbing with folks? I don't know who's Sarah gabbing with. Oh, shoot. Why is it not on the play? I thought I had it on play, but it did not play. All right, live. Who's Sarah gabbing with, Renee? Okay, Amanda is behind. She says, oh my God, yeah, because my mom asked for all my receipts. And then she said, no, my mom does. Collects box tops, apparently. Absolutely, Rogue. Parents can be controlling without being physically abusive. Yeah, 100%. Yes. Yes. I mean, I know people who are very controlling and have never laid a hand on anybody, you know? My my other laptop is getting hot. Hot. I'm going to have to set something under it so it can get some air. Renee says, did Boone gab with folks during the break? I still haven't had my coffee yet, and it shows. I was asking who was gabbing with folks. Oh, Renee, it was QB. QB on the other channel, on my other stream. She's the one that's covering the Ferris trial for me. That was who was gabbing during the break. Yeah. But yeah, as far as the kids' Halloween costumes, I asked, she could be anything in the world. She could be anything in the world. I'm like, what do you want to be for Halloween? And she said, a pirate. Arr. I'm like, okay, pirate you shall be. Ah, Miss King's caught up. Yeah. Rogue said my dad was a jerk to my mom, but the worst I ever got from him was a whack with the wooden spoon. I was a disobedient child. Yes, don't forget to leave your fingerprint on the like button, on the thumbs up button. We would appreciate it very much. Amanda, when you get to this point, bread is life for me too. Any kind of bread. You can tell too.
We are back on the record. 2020 CF 2603, State of Florida versus Sarah Boone. State.
David F. Sharp, half the state. Boone J for the state.
Defense.
James Owens for Sarah Boone.
Tony Henderson for Sarah Boone. Kevin Bass on behalf of Sarah Boone.
All right, Ms. Boone is still seated at counsel's table. Yes, Mr. Owens.
Judge, we had several late witnesses that were scheduled. Where's that for this? We've excused Detective Scott Lowen based on the testimony of Detective Capsel. We've excused Abraham Marino, who was going to be recalled based on the testimony of Detective Capsel.
Yeah, they say that all the time over here. Renee. Morgana. Morgana, I haven't seen her today, but she'll usually pop in and say, leave your DNA. And if you don't want to leave your DNA on the thumbs up button, then put a pair of gloves on and then click the like button.
Outside, she was a witness as a neighbor in that complex, and she would testify about observing physical injuries to Sarah Boone. We've spoken with her over the break that, in our opinions collectively, Tony Henderson and myself, that it's not necessary to call Ms. Gallipoli because we have other evidence of injuries. There was disagreement about that, but I believe that Ms. Boone is now in agreement that we're not going to call Ms. Gallipoli. So that leaves now calling the Orange County Sheriff's Department phone extraction expert.
Mr. Wadden.
Yes, back to the stand, and we've got two short videos. These are the short videos relating to Jorge Torres with a bat and then striking the TV. They're less than a minute apiece. The problem with that is because we excuse...
Ew, Adam, yak.
That's our last witness, so we're going to be done here in probably 11:15, and then...
But Miss Walker is supposed to be here at 1 o'clock?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
And
How
then,
could he not have heard of it?
I haven't had a chance to meet with Dr. Harper, but I'm going to meet with her at lunch over next door, and we anticipate Dr. Harper this afternoon, and then we may be really close to ending the defense's case.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know that.
We're going to have a gap here.
Okay, so...
Wow.
That may... Well, if you're saying that your Presentation with Ms. Wadden is 15 minutes. I don't know what the cross is going to be. It may be de minimis, or you may be saving her for rebuttal. I don't know. Mr. J or Mr. Cacciatore? As it relates to Ms. Wadden, CSI Tech? You're
Yeah,
not calling her
Patricia
a
licks
rebuttal?
it too. Patricia does lick the thumbs up button, she said.
Okay,
But we
awesome.
do need a license.
So what we can do is we can proceed with Ms. Wadden, and we could just take an early lunch and ask them to be back here maybe 12:50. So that way, if we have any issues, we can address them before we start at 1 o'clock. Ms. Boone, you were sworn this morning. I just got a couple of things to go over with you.
One time that you've admitted
There was a
to,
list of
Patricia.
witnesses that was provided to the court last night and again this morning as potential witnesses that may be called in your defense. One of those witnesses was Maria Gallipoli. Your lawyers have advised that they may not be calling that person as a witness in this case. Do you understand that?
I do.
And again, similar to other conversations we've had, I don't want to go into any specifics of any conversations that you've had with any of your lawyers, just whether or not you've had them. Have you had conversations with your lawyers about calling Miss Gallipoli as a witness?
Yes.
Have you had conversations with your attorneys about why they are deciding not to call her as a witness?
Yes.
And similar to what we discussed yesterday, do you understand that your attorneys make the trial strategy decisions, including what witnesses to call or not to call?
Yes.
Okay. Are you still satisfied with their representation of you in this matter?
Oh my God, that's
And are
so
you still
true.
on board with the strategy that has been employed in your defense?
Yes.
Are you in agreement with the strategy not to call Ms. Gallipoli as a witness in this case?
I am.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, ma'am. Then let's go ahead and bring our jury back in and we can call Ms. Uwad and go from there.
Mr.
All right.
Lane, can you excuse Ms. Gallipoli?
All right, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and stand and bring back in our panel.
That's the truth, Patricia. Patricia says you do something one time, like get stuck under a fridge or lick a like button, and suddenly it's your whole identity.
How do you spell Gallipoli?
What I have, Gallipoli.
You never live it down. Covering all their bases with this heifer. Amanda, nice. She says, I have a bakery and teach sourdough classes, LOL. Even if I didn't do that, bread would still be my life. Oh my God. Amazing. I love bread. I love bread. You're right, Rogue. You're right. It's sad. Hey, Kel. Hey, sweetheart. Kel comes in licking the thumbs up button, too. Check. Y'all nasty. Good morning, Shell Bell. Hi. Oh, Renee said making sourdough is a true art.
State to recognize our jury.
Me too.
Defense, do you recognize our jury?
Me
I think
too.
y'all could be seated. Members of the jury, once seated again, if you could confirm that you complied with the court's instructions during our break by raising your hands. Record reflect all hands have been raised. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Judge, we would call forensic phone extraction officer with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, Officer Wadden, to the stand.
Thank you. We'll bring her in.
Okay, you guys, while they're waiting on her to come in, take the stand, I'm going to go use the potty and make myself, I got about this much coffee. So I'm going to go freshen up my cup, let the doggy out to go potty and all that jazz. But I'll be right back in just a couple minutes. If they go on a brief sidebar or anything, just talk amongst yourselves. We'll be all right. Okay.
please swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Good morning, ma'am. Could you state and spell your name for the record for us?
First name is Janella, Junella. Last name Wadden, UAD as in Delta, AN.
Counselor, you may inquire.
Ms. White, again, your official title,
Digital Forensics Examiner.
and are you referred to as a detective, or what is your?
Just an examiner.
Ma'am, Judge, can I approach the witness?
Yes, of course.
Ma'am, I'm going to show you what has been marked as identification defense exhibit AA. And do you recognize that video or that CD of the video?
Yes.
Well, I think we kind of prepped you on it ahead of time. That was extracted from the Sarah Boone phone that you were asked to extract?
Yes, one of the media files, yes.
Okay, and is that video a fair and accurate depiction of one of the videos that was extracted from Sarah Boone's phone?
Yes.
And then identification Z, defense identification, same type of question. You've had a chance to review that video. Is that one of the videos that was extracted from the Sarah Boone phone?
Yes.
Judge, this time I'd like to have these introduced in evidence.
Any objections?
No objection.
All right, what was pre-marked as AA will be received into evidence without objection as defendant 17. What was pre-marked as Z will be received into evidence without objection as defendants 18.
Judge, we're going to play exhibit 17 first.
You may proceed.
And is there a volume? Judge, do you have control of the volume?
Volume is on.
You're gonna help me take this shit out. Real shit. You're gonna help me take it out. You're gonna help me take this shit out. As bad as I want to.
Judge, I'm asking to publish exhibit 18.
You may proceed.
You spoke about it earlier.
Say again, sir.
You spoke about it earlier.
Yes, understood.
They're tendering, no cross.
All right, thank you very much. All right. This witness can't be released, correct?
Yes.
State.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, can the parties approach momentarily, please? Members of our jury, at this point in time, it's 11:08. I know it's a little bit early, but due to the pacing and how quickly we've been moving through the evidence this morning, And how the defense has teed up their witnesses for this afternoon, we do not have anyone until 1 o'clock. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and take our lunch break at this time. I'm going to give you a similar instruction that I've given you over the last couple of days. Jurors, you must not conduct any investigation on your own. This includes reading newspapers, watching television, or using a computer, cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case or the people and places involved in this case. This applies whether you are in the courthouse, at home, or anywhere else. You must not visit places mentioned in the trial or use the internet to look at maps or pictures to see any place discussed during the trial. Jurors do not watch local news or read local newspapers. Jurors must not have discussions of any sort with friends, family members, or even your fellow jurors about the case or the people and places involved. So do not let anyone make comments to you or ask questions about the trial. I want to stress again that just as you must not talk about this case face-to-face, you must not talk about this case by using an electronic device. You must not use phones, computers, or other electronic devices to communicate. Do not send or accept any messages related to this case or your jury service. Do not discuss this case or ask for advice by any means at all, including posting information on an internet website, chat room, or blog. With that, members of the jury, I'm going to ask you to return here to 12 Alpha at 12:50, and we'll pick up shortly thereafter. Thank you so much for your service. Y'all may be seated. Thank you. State, anything we need to address?
Nothing, thank you.
Defense?
No, sir.
All right, we'll see you all at 12:50. Thank you very much. Court's in recess.
Okay, so that was much quicker than I anticipated. I didn't even hardly make it off the potty to get in here to get back to y'all. Okay, so yes, we're going to run straight over and do Delphi. Let me grab the link for you guys so that you can just head straight on over there. Copy the link. Till about 2 this morning, I fell asleep watching too, Gail. I fell asleep watching too. All right. Join us for the Delphi stream here. All right, make sure to like this video. Give it a thumbs up before you leave. Subscribe if you're new. Click the all notification bell. And then hashtag replay, okay? I've got the Delphi stream scheduled for... let me see. 12:05. But I will schedule it for, I'll say... let me see. I want to give QB enough time to get over here because she wants to join me. So we got to get the Ferris stream, make sure she's good over there. I'll say 11:30. That'll be like 15 minutes from now. So I'll go ahead and change it from 12:05 to 11:30. And I'll see you guys over there in about 15 minutes. You can go hang out in the chat, chit chat for a little bit, and then that'll give me time to get my stuff gathered up and get QB over here, okay? All right. Yep, we're hopping. We're hopping. Amanda is behind. You're behind in chat.
Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for watching our...
Jesse Weber. Love you, but no. Okay, so we'll see you guys over there. This is like junior high and trying to find the right classroom. Is this True Crime 101? Yeah, that's us. All right, I'll see you guys over there in a moment, okay? Bye.